Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm going to do a video on lying and how we all lie to ourselves to some extent, and why we do this, and how we can lie in a more honest way in order to not cause more harm than is needed. So reasons we lie are social ideals and aspirations. For example, you might lie to someone about your status because you feel that they will be more likely to accept you. You might lie to someone about your aspirations or you might lie to yourself about your aspirations because you are like, oh, I need to be slimmer, so I might just not bother like eating this massive cake. But then you might just not eat for a day, and then you get really hungry or whatever, and then you just eat loads of food because like you're just trying to like live up to an ideal which is potentially not like attainable, for example. Like that's one example. And a lot of how we lie to ourselves is about how much a childhood wound has affected us, and that's often the root of our lying, which kind of lines up along a lot with narcissism and things like that. So I guess lying about a social ideal would come along with narcissism, because if they don't feel that if they feel inadequate for any reason, they would lie about their anything. With narcissists, sometimes that do lie. But people do it even if you don't lie about a status, which I think everyone does to an extent, to be fair, putting it in context. Or I don't know, but yeah, so subconscious wounds or whatever which why in therapy it's helpful to uncover these things, can be lying about how wounds in our early life have affected us, for protection, and we often justify things that happen in order to be protected from them, and also you can develop like maladaptive ways of living from experiencing these things as well. Cognitive distortions and extremes can reflect as well a reality that is not necessarily healthy. So for example, if you like a cognitive distortion, for example, is one example. I've done a whole video on cognitive distortions if you want to look, but for example, if like you have a bad breakup, you might think that you'll forever be alone. This is a black and white thinking, or an extremist thinking, like a over the top level of thinking for like a situation. But and also you might then not be able to to accept things that are inherently human. For example, life is meaningless unless given meaning, and we all have freedom of choice. And we might justify and then deny certain things that are inherently true for this reason. And this can come down, I don't want to deter us too long. Oh no, this kind of can count. Like I've said in the past, like if you're in large groups, you're less likely to be truthful or upstanding because of like either the need to fit into a social status quo kind of level, and also it's just easier to get away with things in a group than it is in a one-to-one conversation or a small group. In larger groups, it's easier to get carried away with certain ideas and allow a sort of witch hunt idea to happen. So we can easily be culturally conditioned to believe something is true. Like even from a level of like marketing and things like that, like if you can be conditioned to believe, like marketing we know does sometimes like play, or often does play on our insecurities to sell products. For example, people that would buy, like it's a fact that I'm not saying like skin creams aren't necessary, especially for things like eczema and stuff like that and like skin conditions, but I swear I've read in lots of places that like skin creams and stuff, they're not actually necessary for our actual skin by like dermatologists. I'm sure there's like lots of varying ideas around this, but think about the amount of skin products that are available on the market, and like the marketing industry for these like skin products have like deceived us to believe that these things are true. So a level of like inadequacy for how you feel, which is kind of inherent to have insecurities as a human being, is then played on for marketing to be able to sell products and sort of like play on someone's insecurities, and it just allows room for this level of self-deception that can lead to pain and regret for a person. And the fact is, you can make unhelpful and harmful choices to yourself and others if you do live in this sort of like level of deception towards yourself and others. And that's why it's important to take responsibility for your core wounds and responsibility for yourself in general, because if people don't do this, not only can it negatively affect your mental health, but it can affect a lot of things in your own life. But I do think everyone's like on a journey, but at the same time, eventually to take responsibility for yourself is going to be the most important thing, because when people don't do that, it can be very harmful. Because apparently, according to this video I was watching, it was like the idea of like it's a choice not to change when you know you're causing harm to yourself or others. And I think this is a controversial thing to say, because I'm not like, I've been through the mental health system. I know that it takes time once you are in a bad mental state to get yourself, and sometimes it's just a varying level of degree that it takes for each person to stabilize, or you know, it's everyone's own personal journey. And I don't want this to be like I feel like this is coming across too sort of like pushy. That's not how I want it to be. But the idea is that I think just from a lying level, it's not your own choice when you're causing pain to yourself and others. I've heard this idea that a good moral standpoint is better for you, is a good substitute for psychotherapy, for example. So if you're not being honest with yourself, it can detriment your mental health in that way. So I think the idea is that if you know that you're causing harm to yourself or others, you can make a choice to. But it is a gradual process. Like, there are people that go through their whole entire lives, narcissists for example, that never ever take accountability for themselves and never ever, you know, get to a point of, hey, I've inflicted all this harm on someone, for example. So I think the idea of this is that if you're telling yourself like a core lie, but it's not really, I don't think, necessarily going to be the case for most people to take accountability for things like narcissism. Bearing that in mind, they're like personality disorders though, rather than like lies. Even though they bring about lies, they're also brought on by personality disorders. But from a level, it's helpful to be a more honest liar. When you have a strong emotional reaction to things, it's helpful to pause. Or if you have irrational thoughts, it's helpful to pause before if you realise that you might be lying to yourself. I think, to be honest, this brings in the idea of being able to be programmed towards something or be conditioned towards something by a person. For example, if you're in a narcissistic abusive relationship, you might have a lot more reactability towards things where you may not have done should you not have been in that situation. So I think it's just sometimes a process again of sort of like living through life to sort of heal that. But if you do have like strong core wounds, it can be worth looking at them, because if you do have this happen a lot, you can have this level of cognitive dissonance and not examine your own contribution towards certain social situations. So I think this idea was that you can take, like, it's not your responsibility what anyone else does to you, but you do have responsibility from yourself, how you react to that, how you treat other people, and yeah, just sort of like being aware of yourself, I guess. But I suppose if you do find, and you might not be aware, and you might be aware that you might be narcissistic, or you might and I do think there's a level of healthy narcissism which is actually beneficial to some people, and then there's excessive narcissism where you sort of like get very, I haven't actually watched the video. There's actually a video between healthy narcissism and being a narcissist, like being too narcissistic to the point where you're sort of overly narcissistic, and it starts to impact other people because of your level of grandiosity or whatever that may come across as, to harm other people. So I'm trying to sort of like compartmentalise this, because obviously this was brought into it from a video that I watched. And she was talking about how if you are honest with yourself about how you feel about certain things and what your views are, not only will this get to know not only will you get to know yourself better, you can explore different avenues that might suit you better. For example, when I decided to leave my last job, and then now I've like started my own business, which is still like being brought into fruition. She said when she changed her job, she had this idea of like, what if everything changes? What if everything doesn't change? Like, and then she was like, she didn't really want to change jobs because then she had to think about all the things that she'd sort of like lied to herself about and like told herself that she was okay with when she actually wasn't. And I think this is what a lot of people are doing at the moment. They're just sort of like reevaluating what they find useful, what they find helpful, what they want to engage in, what they don't want to engage in, what people they want to have in their life, what people they don't want to have in their life. And I guess I'm on that boat as well. Because you can, and then I watched a video on imposters, right, pretending to be someone you're not, which is kind of along a similar vein. But I'm gonna just put it all in one video because I would usually probably put them into two, but I would like to just make this all one video because I feel like this is quite a lot of information that kind of is relevant to the first thing, so I feel like if you're interested you'll watch, if you don't then fine. Pretending to be someone you're not. Nah, screw it, I'm going to put it in another video. Thanks for listening, bye.